Hey, what's up everybody? Today I want to make a little video comparing the IC-7300 by Icom to the IC-R8600 by Icom, comparing the two receivers. If you're considering buying the 7300 for a receiver, it's receiver purposes, I think this video will be helpful to you comparing the R8600, which is quite a bit more pricey. So let's dispense with the obvious differences first. The 8600, and I'm going to leave you with this little comparison sheet here. The 8600 has much wider frequency coverage. It covers from 10 kilohertz to 3 gigahertz. So you're going to hear a lot more capability in VHF, UHF, all those other bands than you can with the 7300. The 7300 is HF only and 6 meters. So right here, I have this playing on our local state trunk system, just to show you that this is something that the 7300 can't do. But also, even though this is a trunk system, the 8600 doesn't have trunking capability, so it's just scanning the channels here. But it does a really nice job doing that. I have 40 banks of frequencies in here, and I'll find some air stuff to listen to here for you. So this will be the air route traffic control centers here near me. This is obviously not trunked, it's just regular scanning. So it does a very nice job doing this. So if you're interested in VHF, UHF, and that the 8600 could do that, the 7300 cannot do that. But if you're not interested in VHF and UHF, then the discussion about HF is relevant. So we'll do a discussion about HF only. So let me exit this, and we're going to go to this is a medium wave frequency here. So the other obvious difference between these two is the 7300 is a transceiver. Well, this is 8600 is a receiver only. The 7300 is 100 watt ham transceiver, very popular and very capable. So you may ask, well, how did I end up getting both of these? I had the 8600 first as a receiver only, and I had a different Icom transceiver, Icom 746, that I used for 20 years, and all of a sudden my 746 quit. So now I was in the dilemma. I need a HF transceiver to do my hamming. So I went ahead and bought the 7300. So that's how I ended up with both. From the brochures and the literature and that, you think, well, they're twins, just with the different frequency ranges and the price, but they're really not twins at all. Significant price difference. This is why it's important to examine these performance differences, because of the price difference. The 8600, and I have the price listed here, is $2,480 here in March of 2023, whereas the 7300 transceiver is about $1,000. So much cheaper if you're looking at just HF, just to get the 7300. But let's look at some differences here, and I got these racked up for you here. We already talked about frequency. The 8600 has a center tuning meter up here, so when you're tuned to FM, you can look at the center. The 7300 doesn't have that. The scope range on the 8600 is 5 megahertz. Well, the reason it's so wide is because obviously if you're looking at something in the 800 megahertz, 700 megahertz, 400 megahertz, you want to see a lot more spectrum than you maybe want to see on HF. So the 8600 scope can go up to 5 megahertz wide, whereas the 7300 only goes to 1 megahertz wide, but I think that's adequate for HF. I set these two up. There's numerous settings you can do on the spectrum scopes. I set these two up to be identical on the colors and the speeds and what you see, the widths here and all that. We're tuned to the same station, a broadcast station here near me. So there's a lot of settings you can have to change the color, but I have them set up identically here so you can kind of get the feel for what this is. Next topic is the scroll tuning. The 7300 has what's called scroll tuning. So you can do this is fixed. So the cursor will tune up and down here and in a fixed range. There's also center tuning where the scope slews around and your stations move around. That's not exceptionally helpful while it's moving, but it can do that. And then it has also this feature here, scroll. So when it's more like a fixed, but when you jump ranges, it'll go ahead and jump ranges for you. The 8600 doesn't do that. Now, why doesn't it do that? I don't know. It seemed like a pretty nice feature and something that would be easy to implement by Icom, but they don't have that feature in the 8600. So you'll see here in my discussion, the 7300 has numerous features that the 8600 doesn't have. Okay, size-wise, like I mentioned, these are not twins. You see over here I have RS7000 and RS7100. I'm not going to move the tripod, but the cases on these are twins, really. The knobs are the same. Everything's the same size, but these two are not twins. The 7300 is a little bit bigger. It's 2 centimeters wider. The tuning knob is a little bigger here on the 7300, and it operates very well. So these are not twins at all. Just to get that out of the way. On modes, the 7300 has all the normal ham modes, sideband, single sideband, upper and lower, CW, RIDI, AM and FM, but it does not have synchronous detection on AM, whereas the 8600 does have synchronous detection. So you can select that right here. Is what I just did here. Selected dual sideband synchronous detection. So seemed like that would be easy to implement in the 7300, but it's not there. The 8600 has numerous other modes as well as the what the hams might use. It's got D-Star, NextDen, DPMR, P25, which I showed you earlier on that trunking system. So if you got a P25 digital, it will listen to that, but it's not trunked. But this lacks DMR. So the hams in Europe are complaining that they should have DMR. I'm not a big DMR fan. I do have DMR on a scanner, but it does lack that. So if you're looking for DMR, you're not going to get it in the 8600. So the use of buttons, I'm going to show you this little hot sheet, and I'll hold this up here later that you can stop and read this sheet. The 7300 makes more liberal use of real buttons for noise blanker, noise reduction, preamp, notch, things like that. It's got some ham-only things, receiver incremental tuning, delta tune for transmit. There's real buttons for all this stuff, whereas the 8600, it's a little smaller case, so it makes more use of menus. Multifunction knobs, etc., getting in the menus to do things. But once you get the hang of it, it's not a big obstacle, but it is a difference between the two. On tones, the 7300 has PL tones, CTCSS for repeater use on 10 meters and 6 meters, and you can employ those tones. The 8600 has that as well, but it's also got digital coded squelch and NACs for the digital, for the P25. So there's more tone capability here. This radio, the 7300 does not have DCS, but on ham repeaters, it's really not necessary. On user-defined steps, the 7300 has 8 discrete choices that you can select for the step size, whereas the 8600 has 13 built-in step sizes. And the reason there's more on the 8600 is because, like in the aircraft band, you got 8.33 kilohertz. For UHF, there's 12.5 kilohertz. There's 15 kilohertz. So there's more step sizes in here in the 8600 than you have in the ham rig. Also, there's user-definable steps in the 8600. So I'll demonstrate how that works. If I can here. To define a user step, you have all these tuning steps are built in. To define, let's say we wanted to go for the FM broadcast band, you would want 200 kilohertz. So you can user define that right here. Now I have a beef with Icom about this, and I'll get to that in a second. But when you're doing FM broadcast, it's real handy to do 200 kilohertz here. You could also lower it naturally to do finer tuning on FM. If you have a strong signal nearby, you can put 1 kilohertz and get into an odd channel and do a little bit better tuning there. But this has user definable. This one does not. So you cannot, for instance, here on the HF aircraft band, you might want to go 3 kilohertz because that's how wide, the channels are 3 kilohertz apart. Whereas on the 7300, you would have to do 1 kilohertz. It's not a big obstacle, but it's just a feature that the 8600 has that the 7300 doesn't have. The tuning, this is my beef with Icom. The tuning on 7300 with the dial can go to 1 hertz tuning. So we can tune that here to 1 hertz. So on AM, it's not a big deal, but if you're tuning a pirate station or a CW station, it's much handier to have that. Icom displays this 0 here, and I've beefed about this in another video, but the dial is incapable of tuning this 1 hertz here. You can key it in. You can key this in. If I can make it, that's not what I want to do. You can enter, oh well, I'm not gonna trouble you, but you can key in the 1 hertz position, or if you have software, you can program it with the 1 hertz position, but this dial will not do it. So myself and other hams have been in touch with Icom. They say they can't do it, and I'm like, by can't, I think they don't want to. They don't want to do it. But they have it in the 7300, which is maddening. So I've given up on this now that I have this radio, but if you really want 1 hertz tuning for very low frequency use or pirates or whatever, just know you're gonna have to key that in manually or put it in with software because this dial will not tune it. I don't understand why they did it that way, but they did. Now, on the sound for the 2 radios, the fidelity, I think it's excellent. I had an Icom 746 before this. It was terrible on AM. You would not want to listen to shortwave broadcasts on that. It was okay for sideband. This is much better, the 7300. You can listen to broadcasters all day long, and it's very pleasant to listen to. So I've set the filters up. I'm on filter 1 here, filter 1. I've set these filters up identically on these 2 radios. 9 kilohertz wide on this one for filter 1. So it does sound great. So if you're using a ham rig right now for SWL use and you're wondering what kind of sound are you going to get out of this, it's going to be much improved on the 7300 than maybe what you're used to on the older ham rigs. So let's see, opinion on HF performance. Well, this guy Sherwood Labs tests these HF receivers with sophisticated tests, and on 3rd order dynamic range, he tested the 7300 at 97 dBs and the 8600 at 98 dBs. That's really indistinguishable in the lab. He had 2 8600s he tested. They had different results, but these 2 were close together. I'm telling you, I cannot tell the difference on HF between these 2 for my purposes. For ham use, for SWL, for AM broadcasts, they both perform the same. You can go to a strong adjacent channel and hear the weaker station next to a strong station. They both perform beautifully. So the performance on HF should not be, there's no compromise in either one of these. I think it's a draw. On antenna inputs, the 7300 has only 1. The 8600 has 3. So, you know, you can put disc cones here, a second HF antenna, and that. So there's three choices here. On antenna tuner, obviously the 8600 is a receiver only, so it doesn't have an antenna tuner. The 7300, however, has an internal tuner, and I am running an Icom AH4 external tuner. So what that enables you to do is to match the antenna to the 50 ohms for the radio for the frequency you're on. If you run the tuner, you know, in the ham bands, that's compliant to do. Outside the ham bands, I would say it's probably not compliant, even though you run a low power. You're not supposed to be transmitting outside the ham bands, but it is capable of doing it. So if you have weak signals on the high bands, if you're listening to SWL from on 17 megahertz, and you can actually run the tuner and match the antenna here. Whereas the 7300, you would need some sort of manual external turn, the 8600 rather, you need some sort of manual external tuner to do that. So even though I would say I don't recommend doing that, if there's a Mars mod in the radio, it'll run the external tuner and tune the antenna for the frequency. Now on the low bands, you really don't need that sensitivity, so it's not a big issue there. But this 7300 will do that external tuner. S-meter jack. I have this little S-meter here that I made. This is a 2-volt DC meter. The 8600 has a jack in the back that you just plug in a 3.5 millimeter audio plug, and you're getting S-meter readings. You have to provide your own meter artwork and such, but there's a feature in here to calibrate your meter to the consistent S unit that you're getting here. So you just go in a menu and you adjust the level here, and then you call it good. This is obviously not a calibrated dB S meter, but for me it's a relative S meter. It's very handy to hook up. 7300 doesn't have that feature because for ham use, the meter is a multi-function meter. It does power output, SWR, ALC, all sorts of other functions. So having, you know, a simple plug-in S meter that doesn't address the other needs of this meter. So the 7300 doesn't do that. But this is a nice feature here. You can just plug this little, I bought this little 2-volt DC meter on eBay for a couple of bucks, slap the artwork on it, and now I have an external S meter. I don't need to read this little one here. We already talked about transmitter. This is a 100-watt transmitter. Obviously, a receiver doesn't have that. Memories. There are 101 memories in the 7300. There are 2,000 memories in the 8600. So I have 40 banks of stuff here, all sorts of pirate radio, railroads, aircraft, police, fire, all sorts of things plugged in here with the PL tones, the digital coded squelch tones, NACs, all these things. So there's a lot more memory here in this radio. Just know that when you get the 7300, you're not going to have all those memories. So software to program the memories, do you need it? I would say for the 7300, you do not need it because there's only 101 memories anyway. I don't have software for this. I just do it manually. Whereas on this 8600, to get the most out of this, you're probably going to want software because manually programming 2,000 memories into this thing is going to be a chore. You'll probably wear out your fingers. So let me just demonstrate here, like Marine, okay? I've got the Marine here, and I've got all the Marine frequencies and the alpha tags for the channels on there. That's just an example of what I have in my 40 banks. So we'll go back to where we were here with this station. So I use RT system software for this. Do I love the software? No, I do not love it. It's clunky. It's hard to use. It doesn't sort the frequencies well, but it does work. I mean, so I use it, and that's how I got my 2,000 memories in here, and I've filled this thing up. The screens are identical. They're 4.3-inch screens. SD recording. So there's an SD card in each one of these radios. On the SD card, you can save all the settings for the radio. So all these hundreds of little, the screen preferences and all that gets saved on here. And you save all the memories. And it's a real simple matter of saving this. You go memory, set, SD card, save setting, new file, and this is today's settings, enter, and I think I've got 16 gigabytes on this card, And so I just saved all the memories and the settings and everything from my radio. So if something goes wrong and I want to go back to what I had before, you can go on the SD card and you can look at your settings and recover the settings. You can also do software upgrades when Icom publishes them through this SD card. Now, something I use on the 8600, I use this every day. I record talk radio programs on here. So right now it's recording this station. Depending on the size of the SD card, I think this will do about 300 hours, which is more than 10 days of continuous recording. I only do a couple hours a day and then I erase it. But so just record stop. And then, so they both do that. So both radios do the same thing. The amount of recording you get just depends on the size of the SD card. Very handy feature. I use that every day. So mute. This is how these things work together. I've never seen a video of anybody comparing these two together, but I do use these together every day. And what you don't want to do is blow this radio up, the receiver, by transmitting on this one. So I have these. Icom provided a send jack on the 7300 to control a outboard linear amplifier or whatever you might want to control on off. And this radio has a mute jack on the back. So I wired those two together, and so whenever let me put the receiver on. Now, it's not going to, I'm going to key the mic here. It's not going to transmit on AM broadcast band because it's not capable of doing that. But just to demonstrate the mute feature, when I key the mic here, it mutes the RF on this radio. So the 8600 receiver, if you spend this kind of money on it, you definitely don't want to blow it up by transmitting with a nearby antenna. So when you key the mic here, it mutes that, and when you unkey, it unmutes it. So that's a way of ensuring that you're not going to blow up your radio, and it's very handy. I used that on my previous Icoms too, the R71. I would mute that. So let's see. So ergonomic opinion. Okay, this is just an opinion. I like the ergonomics of the 7300 a little better, and why that is, it's a little bigger, the knobs are bigger, and it's got more features that are button based and knobs. So if you ever shopped for a car recently and you got tired of doing touchscreen for your air conditioning and your radio in the car, a lot of the common features, noise blanker, noise reduction, preamp, notch, all of those things are on real buttons here. So I would give the nod a little check mark. It's not a big thing, but a check mark for the ergonomics to the 7300. Okay, so final opinion on if you're wanting a radio for just HF work, for receiving hams, SWLs, AM broadcast, and all that, you want to buy the 7300 because the capability is identical to the 8600, but it cost a lot less. It's $1,000 versus $2,480 for the 8600. On the other hand, if you are doing VHF, UHF, Milcom, if you're in a lab, if you want to include HF, SWL, if you need P25 or some of these other digital modes, you want to do sophisticated receiver work, Earth, Moon, Earth, and radio astronomy and satellites and all that, you should buy the 8600 because obviously this 7300 is HF only. But regarding HF performance, I think they're identical. They both perform beautifully. The sound on the 7300 is every bit as good as the 8600, whereas my older Icom, transceiver, it sounded pretty terrible on broadcast. This one sounds
School Athletic Directors Association. Wake up and text.
This one has good sound. So there's no compromises there. So let me see if there's any other conclusions I want to leave you with, other than leaving you this little comparison sheet that you can pause on. So yeah, I kind of accidentally acquired both radios. If my old transceiver had not quit, I'd probably still be using it. But now that I have the 7300, I'm glad I have it. I really like it, and I would recommend getting it. Another alternative, and Icom may not like this, if you want to get UHF, and I have all this other scanners and stuff, you buy a 7300 for HF and you buy a DMR digital scanner for VHF and UHF. You know, that won't get you sophisticated receive capability on satellites and astronomy and lab work and all that, but it will still get the job done. And I do have a, you know, digital scanner up here, so that's another way of doing that. Okay, well, so that's what I wanted to do today, is to compare the 7300 with the 8600, because I haven't seen any other comparison videos of somebody who had both at the same time, and I just wanted to illustrate the differences. They're not twins. There are some differences in the features, but on HF, they, I think, perform identically, and I think you'll be happy with either one of them. All right, that's all. I'm out.